It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Today's podcast, we're diving into the latest research and talking about what can help us as parents to raise happier families. G'day, I'm Dr. Justin Coulson. I'm here with my wife and mum to our 6 kids, Mrs. Happy Families, Kylie Coulson. Kylie, 3 studies today. We're going to talk about peanut allergies. We're talking about social media or screens because it's just the enduring, never-ending conversation if you're a parent of a child in 2024. And also a really fascinating study that I wanted to share for our neurodivergent friends, Autism and Touch, a new study out of Italy looking at how touch affects those who are neurodivergent with an autism diagnosis versus those who are neurotypical, no diagnosis at all. Let's dive into it.
It's interesting. When I think about my upbringing, I don't remember ever hearing about a peanut allergy.
No, neither do I.
Didn't exist.
Yeah.
Everyone took peanut butter. We had Nutella. I'd never heard of it. And yet in today's world, it feels like every second kid is allergic to something, and it's altered what our kids can even put in their lunchboxes.
Okay, so an important note as we have this conversation, I mean, some schools are completely peanut-free. There are bans all over the place. We're going to talk about a psychological intervention, but I want to be really clear. If your child has a peanut allergy, please follow the medical advice of your practitioner. We're speaking about an intervention and some research. We're not giving advice when it comes to your child and peanuts.
So what did they actually find?
Let me give you I'm not going to bury the lead. Here it is right now. Peanut allergies could drop by 71% with a brand new intervention developed by some researchers at King's College in London.
71%. That's huge.
Yeah. So the intervention, feeding kids peanuts. Oh. I know.
Can I just say it's interesting when we hear about whether it's a peanut allergy or, someone's been hurt in a car accident or something, it changes the way we live life, right?
Definitely.
So you hear
we become really risk averse.
Yeah. You hear that there's peanut allergies and all of a sudden all the peanuts get banned.
Right.
Or there's a car accident down this particular road. Well, that's an unsafe road to travel on. We go so polar extreme, and this research studies suggesting that may be the case?
Yeah, here's what they did. What they basically said was feed kids peanuts regularly from 4 months of age to 5 years, and they're less likely to show up with the allergy. Now, I need to note very clearly, when they're saying feed kids peanuts regularly from 4 months, they're not saying give your 4-month-old a peanut. That would be potentially life-altering. It could be catastrophic. What they're saying is peanuts and peanut products. So consider the developmental appropriateness of handing your child a peanut. If they're too young to be able to chew, bite, swallow a peanut, give them peanut paste, give them peanut butter, give them some other nut-oriented product.
Or things that contain
traces
of nuts.
So that they're okay. And as they get older and can suddenly and can chew those nuts, that's when you start to give them the full Monty, the whole nut. Basically, what they found, this is fascinating. This method works even if your child never eats another peanut after the age of 5. I love this. So if you can get your kid exposed to nuts in those first 5 years and you don't have any reactions, which typically you won't, after the age of 5, they may decide, I don't like peanuts. I never want to eat another nut again, and they'll still be okay.
So how did they actually figure this out?
Okay, Professor Gideon Lack is a King's College London researcher. He published this research in the New England Journal of Medicine, and what he found basically is avoiding. So the old story was avoid nuts, as you said. Avoidance is necessary. What he found in his study was that avoiding nuts increases the risk of allergy. Doesn't reduce the risk; it increases the risk of allergy. They had 640 participants. They gave half of them nuts during the first 5 years of their life. They gave the other half none. They didn't give the kids nuts. They instructed parents to either give or not give their children peanuts. And then they tested them at age 5 to see if they had the allergy. There was an 81% reduced risk of allergy in the nut group versus the no nut group. What's fascinating to me, though, is that they followed up at the age of 13. So from this point on, there's no direction given whatsoever about whether you should or should not eat nuts. 15.5% of those people who avoided nuts in those first 5 years were allergic to nuts.
Wow.
Whereas only 4.4% of nut eaters were allergic. So, to be clear, feeding your child nuts in the first 5 years does not absolutely guarantee they will not have the nut allergy, but it reduces the likelihood of the peanut allergy by 71%.
That's huge.
It's enormous. So that's our study number 1. Feed your kids nuts. Nuts are good.
I couldn't imagine living life without nuts.
Get into nuts. All right, study number 2, social media use and the mental health of children and adolescents.
I feel like every doctor's desk has a social media or screen aspect to it. What's different about this study?
This is a smart study. It's been pre-registered. There's a control group who lives life as normal, and then there's an intervention group. In the intervention group, we've got 181 children and adolescents in a Danish study, and their job is to do a 2-week screen media reduction intervention. Okay, so basically, the children and adolescents hand in their smartphones and their tablets, and they're not allowed more than 3 hours of screens per week per person.
You know, you say that, and that just sounds like bliss.
It does, doesn't it?
Honestly.
You almost floated away as you said it. Your eyes started to flutter and you're like, So, would you like me to tell you what they found? Of course.
Of course.
Fewer emotional symptoms. That is, children were better regulated. There was less dysregulation in the intervention group compared to the control group.
I kind of want to say duh.
Oh, I know.
I really, it's so obvious.
Fewer peer problems. In other words, the children were just better at social stuff and
I won't say it again. But
duh. And more pro-social behaviour.
Duh.
Kids are nicer to each other and they manage their emotions better when they don't have as much access to screens.
Isn't it amazing? I feel like we got a really huge sense of this during COVID when everything shut down and we just were able to kind of really tap into family life together.
Well, some people did, but some people went the other direction and screens became their lives, especially around schooling, right? And some people said, this is killing us. Got to get off the screens. Whereas, as you said, for us, we were really conscious of bringing it down.
So what's your take on this?
My take, in a nutshell, Mark Zuckerberg and his colleagues, that's just far too polite a word for who they are and what they are responsible for more unhappiness in our young people and on a larger scale than perhaps anyone else in human history. That's my take. I absolutely cannot comprehend the pure mendacity, the deceitfulness, and their ongoing manipulation of our families and our children and young people's lives in search of attention economy dollars. They are just absolutely disgraceful. I blame the system. I blame the politicians. But because nothing is happening, unfortunately, as parents, it lands on us. And if we're not doing something about it, we are also, unfortunately, responsible. I was at an event just the other day. I was giving a talk and somebody told me that their 7-year-olds on Snapchat. Why? Because their big brothers and sisters are on Snapchat. And I just said, no, as a parent, you've got a responsibility. Get your 7-year-old off Snapchat. They don't need to be on Roblox. They don't need to be on Minecraft. More and more evidence is coming out telling us that we, at the very least, need to be breathtakingly cautious. But I think when you look at a study like this one out of Denmark, we're seeing really clearly just get the kids outside, get them being physically active, have them involved in play, especially risky play, and get them involved with other people, children, outside, not in the house, not with a screen. They're going to be so much better off, better emotionally regulated, more physically capable, and they're also going to be more pro-social as a general rule.
Well, I'm going to lower your blood pressure because I feel like it's gone up. Our last study, we're talking about autism and touch. This is quite intriguing. Yeah,
so most people do better with touch. We had a doctor's desk episode a month and a half, 2 months ago, where we talked about the importance of touch. You got very excited in that one. Because if you're neurotypical and you get touched, so long as it's consensual and it's the kind of touch that you would like, oh gosh, it just feels good, right? Italian researchers have looked at the difference between neurotypical responses to touch and neurodivergent responses to touch with people who are diagnosed autistic.
And what did they find?
In a nutshell, lower physiological responses to touch, but higher ratings for both pleasant and unpleasant touch. So, in other words, it's really complicated. There's a lot of sensory issues around this, and I think we probably need to dig deeper, especially for any parent of an autistic child, or maybe even for any autistic parents who listen to the pod. This will probably resonate, and there'll be a few kind of moments.
So why does touch actually matter?
Okay, so touch matters. We did discuss this briefly in that last podcast, but let's talk about it. Number one, it's really important to help establish and maintain relationships before verbal skills are developed. Okay, so when you've got a brand new baby, it's all about touch. Crucial role in human communication, crucial role in social interaction, and it conveys so much emotional and social meaning. It promotes attachment, social affiliation, bonding, and we know, especially if touch is consensual and it's the kind of touch that somebody wants, there are really pleasant effects. Like we just feel really good about that. The question about autism, though, not particularly well answered, and this study helps us to answer it.
So what did they do in this study?
Yeah, 48 participants, 24 with ASD, and 24 typically developing controls. Participants with ASD.
So it's quite a small group.
Yeah, it is. 24 in each, but that's enough. That is enough for us to get something meaningful here. Essentially, participants, they sat down, put their left arm on a table. It was hidden from view by a wooden panel, so they couldn't see it. And then each participant was touched on their left forearm. Different types of touch. There was what's called affective touch, which is slow, gentle strokes, and controlling kinds of touch. So that was lots of tapping. That's how you would characterize it. Just tap, 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 tap. So I mean, kind of annoying and not at all like the affective, slow, gentle strokes. The experimenter delivered the how would I say it? The experimenter delivered the touch stimuli and record. They had it all set up so they could record the physiological responses of the participant using a device that measured skin conductance, which is a pretty good way of identifying whether or not there's any autonomic nervous system activity. And in addition to having that skin conductance recorded, each participant also rated the touch on how pleasant or unpleasant it was, just using a numerical scale. So pretty basic, really flexible, allows participants to pause if they don't like it, if they're overwhelmed, if they're feeling fatigued and that kind of thing.
And what was the outcome of the study?
In a nutshell, individuals with ASD showed lower overall skin conductance compared to neurotypical participants, which means that there's a lower autonomic response. And this is where I think it gets really interesting. While typically developing participants had a higher physiological response to affective touch compared to the controlling tapping touch, that wasn't shown in the ASD group. In other words, people with ASD did not show a distinct autonomic response to the two different kinds of touch. It was basically, you're touching me, right?
Yeah.
Full stop, end of story. You're touching me. Yes, there is a difference, but you are touching me. Whereas neurotypical people were like, I like that one. I don't like that one.
Yeah.
Here's something really interesting though. Despite the lack of that physiological differentiation, individuals with ASD rated both the affective and the control touch higher than typically developing participants by our neurotypical participants, which means that they subjectively are experiencing the touch more intensely on both the positive and the negative scale. I think this is fascinating to look at, and it highlights...
But not at a physiological level. Like this is...
It's really curious, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you're a parent of an autistic kid, I think what I would be saying really is, do you like it when I touch you? How do you like to be touched? I think that it just requires exploration with an acknowledgement that touch can, for a child who has any kind of sensory issues, it can be overwhelming and frustrating and just too much. So again, my main emphasis based on what this study is showing is consent. Consent and conversation around touch are going to be your best friends.
So 3 big studies today. We've talked about how to lower our kids' possibility of having a nut allergy by actually exposing them to it from as
4 months.
Early as 4 months.
Just don't give them whole nuts at 4 months, please.
Reducing screen use with our families is going to deeply enhance
We're going to have better kids.
your family connections and everything else that goes with it.
Right.
And autistic children in touch. This is really intriguing.
I'm so glad that you enjoyed our doctor's desk. You normally complain about it. It looks like you actually got something out of this one. Each of these studies will be linked in the show notes so that you can get the details for those of you who are curious about learning more. We will link to the actual scholarly article. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Hey, if you would like to help your children to do better with their big emotions, Felt, Fostering Emotional Learning Together, is the brand new bonus as part of our Happy Families membership. So cheap, so valuable. Activities that you can do with your kids to help them to be more regulated. Check out everything that you need to know about it via the memberships tab at happyfamilies.com.au. And we'll be back tomorrow with I'll Do Better Tomorrow.